Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It's Eric Coffin. This is the 5th of March, 2021, Friday. It's the second day of MIF. On the first day, yesterday, in my presentation block, one of my guest companies was Telson Mining, a company I started following quite recently. I'm here with Shearing, the CEO, to talk about Telson, which is actually a producer, but to my mind, it's mainly a turnaround story, and they're in the middle of a couple transactions right now that are really going to change the finances of the company and the outlook quite a bit. And they've already actually engineered a very good turnaround so far at their currently producing property, Campo Morado. It's not really out there in the market yet, mainly because they just haven't hit the reporting date for the financing, because most of the real improvements happened in the last 3 or 4 months. But I'm thinking year-end financials and Q1 financials, when they come out in the next couple of months, I think people will be surprised at how much the situation's actually improved. Can you give us just sort of a thumbnail of what did you guys do in the last, say, 6 to 9 months since you restarted again post-COVID to, what's helped your operating numbers look so much better?
Well, several things, Eric. Obviously, metal prices have improved quite a bit, so that was a big help. That's one that you always welcome.
Yeah.
But on site, the things we've done were really related to the mill itself, the SAG mill. We had an old design in the SAG mill of the liners. It wasn't working properly. It was kind of losing the bolts that hold the liners in place all the time. So we were having quite a bit of a lot of downtime. So we actually switched back to the original design of that mill. And as soon as we did that, the mill started to work perfectly. In fact, we broke some of our own production records over the last several months at the mine site. And we really only accomplished that in the beginning of the third quarter, or beginning of the fourth quarter of last year. And so since then, this mill has been working, 100%, is functioning very well, getting great throughputs, 2,300 tons a day, and the resulting concentrates production has been great. So we've been able to increase our sales, and with a more healthy zinc price, that's really contributed to the economics and made us turn the thing around, and we are now making a decent operating profit on a monthly basis around the $800,000 US level. So other things we've done have just got all of the equipment functioning properly. We had a pretty hard time over the past couple of years with not enough money around, and some of the equipment started to get in ill repair, and we couldn't afford to fix it. So we shut the mine down in 2019 because of the low zinc prices for 6 months, and started back up in the beginning of 2020. And then since that time, have improved the mill, had more equipment working, better haulage. We hired a contractor to haul the ore from the mine up to the mill, which solved some of our equipment problems in transporting ore. And we've gone in and got all of the underground drills working again, so we can actually make the blast to produce the ore necessary to feed the mill. And with the increased production at the mill, it's all worked out quite well.
Well, one thing about Campo Morado too that it probably bears mentioning, when you bought this from Nearstar, Nearstar was in the process of trying to make it a bigger operation kind of before they threw in the towel in Mexico, as it were, because of the base metal prices, this, that, or the other thing. You haven't been in a position until now to really complete all of the improvements that are 70 or 80% down. I know if people flip through your slide deck, I think there's a couple of aerial shots of Campo Morado, and you'll see a couple of circuits outside that kind of look like they're weirdly placed out there by themselves, but those are the ones that are almost finished. What's on site and is ready to plug and play at this point? I mean, how much stuff did they leave you that you can actually pull in relatively cheaply?
Well, that specific expansion you were talking about, it's those big yellow flotation cells in the front of the mill. So Nearstar was planning to put that into production and increase production by 1,000 tons per day. They were 80% complete when they made the decision to put the mine on care and maintenance. And so all of that equipment is there for us. And they were also had just equipped to do a microfine grind on the material. So you grind it through the SAG mill, and then you take it through your initial grinds. And then there's equipment required to go to a microfine grind. So for example, what we're producing now or grinding to on site is about 30 to 40 microns. The fine grinding equipment that Nearstar brought in would take that down to about 10 microns. And that should allow, in fact, all the metallurgical testing they conducted showed that it will improve the base metal recovery substantially. And by increasing the lead recoveries, will automatically increase the silver recoveries, because a lot of the silver is in with the galena and the lead mineral. So what they did is they had I think they brought in 3 additional vertical mills, the SDM mills that are capable of fine grinding. That equipment's brand new, it was never turned on, and it's there on site for us.
And are they set up, or are they just kind of in crates over in the back someplace or something?
Well, two of them were set up in this circuit, the yellow flotation cell circuit. You can see them standing there. So those are already set up.
So to bring those on stream, you have to bring the whole circuit on stream, essentially.
Not necessarily. I mean, we could just pipe it into the existing stream if we had to. And there's also an unused one inside the existing mill that they had set up. So that is already available to us.
Okay.
So we've got some metallurgical testing underway to know what kind of recoveries we're going to get with this microfine grinding. And we're also bringing in that pilot plant testing from the Malgwen Mineral Services guys out of the UK. So, excuse me, we believe that should be on site in the next 45 days, maybe 2 months. And then we've got 3 months of testing to test a number of things. One is the ultrafine grinding recoveries for lead, zinc, and copper, which we are confident they will be vastly improved by going to the microfine grind. And with that material, the leftover material, so the tails out of that, we would be doing the leach ox process to recover more of the gold and silver. So the expansions that you're referring to are increased throughput by 1,000 tons per day to get to the mill to 3,000 tons per day, increased recoveries of base metals, but probably, and perhaps the most important one, is the increased recoveries of precious metals. So the mine at this point in time, all of the mineralogy is refractory. So we can't get a lot of the gold and silver out of it. We get about 15% of the gold. We get about 30 to 40% of the silver. So at current recovery rates. This leach ox process was tested initial phase with the Malgwen Mineral Services team back in 2015 when Nearstar was shutting the mine down. They wanted to test to see what kind of improvements they could get. It was a very successful test, and it increased gold recoveries. Well, let me back up a little bit. They tested 2 ore bodies. One of them was the ore body they were mining at that time, which we assume was the G9 ore body that had the best recoveries, best metallurgy. And then they went and out to the most distal ore body, which is called La Reforma, and they tested that. And that had traditionally the worst metallurgical recoveries. So within the tailings material they tested for the ore body they were mining, so the best material, they increased gold recoveries up to 60%, and they increased the silver recoveries up to 80%. So that's a 400% increase in our current gold recoveries and a 200% increase in our current silver recoveries. So these are big numbers, because this is a precious metal rich volcanogenic massive sulfide deposit. On a global basis, our resources show about, I think it's 1.6 grams per ton gold and about 128 grams per ton silver. So if we can increase those recoveries, that's a large amount of revenue to come back into the project. Moving on to this leach ox, to explain it a little bit, it's really just an oxidation process. So a lot of our gold is tied up in the pyrite, and the pyrite we would try to make a pyrite concentrate, and we could actually potentially sell that pyrite concentrate to recover the gold that way, to sell it all to a smelter. Or if we take it through this leach ox process, it will oxidize it, and we can leach out the metal after it's been oxidized. And that's really the technology behind it. It's a forced oxidation of the material that you would be pushing through their system.
Well, yeah, and I flipped through the report that they gave Nearstar, and that's one of the things I noticed early in the report was, not surprisingly, when you think about what they're trying to do, an important part of the process is a fine grind. So I didn't actually realize until today that you had those vertical mills literally sitting in or beside the mill, because I mean, you take that out of the equation, you take the actual black box leach ox. I know those guys, for their own reasons, they don't sell them, they lease them. So it sounds to me like if this works as well as you hope, the capex to do this is actually in the greater scheme of things quite small. It'd be tiny, really.
It would be relatively low compared to having to buy all this equipment ourselves. Having the SDMs there is fantastic. We just don't have to spend that capital. It's there. All we have to do is hook them up and turn them on. And the leach ox process uses they're called the Arkin reactors, and they supply those on a lease basis. The only thing we would have to fund is really the leach plant, the recovery of the gold in the leach out of the leach process. So that's not something they would supply. We would have to source it and purchase that. But as far as the capital cost goes to do all that, I don't have a good estimate yet.
Yeah.
We have to get the expansion of the flotation circuit re-engineered. I mean, the engineering on that was back in 2015. So we have to bring it up to current standards, current costs. And then there's a little bit of equipment we would need to put it in place. But I would, and you can't hold me to these numbers, but I was taking a guess. I think it would be in the neighborhood of 5 million, absolute maximum 10 million to get that copper circuit back or the expansion circuit back on stream. And it could be less. I don't know yet. We just have to get the studies done. And, honestly, we haven't been healthy enough to engage in those studies.
Well, the kind of, I mean, I realize I'm not expecting you to do the math, because you're sort of not allowed to, 43-101 and all that stuff. But I mean, I've done it back of the envelope, and if this thing works and they spend the money that Ralph is talking about, based on the numbers I played around with, the thing pays for itself in like 3 weeks. I mean, it's a joke. Like,
it would be really quick, yeah. And one thing I haven't mentioned too, Eric, is that tailings disposal facility we have. It's the lower tailings disposal facility, which is full and not currently being used. That material, we have all of the historic records, the daily production reports from when the mine was operating. So we have a really good knowledge of the content of the metal in that tailings facility. And this is not 43-101 compliant, but there's probably 280,000 ounces of gold equivalent just with gold and silver, and there's likely around 0.4% copper in there and 1 point something zinc. So if we're successful with this IMOFLOT flotation technology at a microfine grind, we might be able to recover some of the base metals in that tailings facility, as well as some of the gold and silver there. And that's really low cost, and that stuff's just sitting there. It's already ground to probably 30 microns. We just go to a finer grind and process it. So that could be a little mine in itself for a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, the big news was really the finance package for the other mining operation, where you're going to finish that and get it into construction. But I mean, the reason why I keep harping on Campo subscribers was because I ran through the numbers on all of these things, these improvements you can do, and they're pretty startling. I mean, the amount of potential increased cash flow is very, very large.
It certainly can be. And Campo Morato's got a bit of a bad reputation amongst the industry of a really tough project because of its metallurgy. But if we solve that metallurgy, it'll become very widely known very, very quickly. Okay,
and let's talk about your new project, which of course is your old project.
Yes.
That you've just announced a $25 million US finance package. That's enough to get it into production. So what's the, now that you're getting this financing package completed, what's the nuts and bolts? What do you have to do on the ground to kind of get this thing finished?
Well, the project right now, I would estimate it to be 50% constructed. So the flotation cells are installed in the structure of the mill. We've gotten over 90% of the underground development completed to provide access to at least 2 to 3 years of ore. What we have to complete is finish off the mill. We have to install the ball mills. Foundations for one are largely complete. We'll be running 2 ball mills there, around 500 tons per day capacity in each one. Install the crushing system, and then we have to build a water line from some underground workings near the river that will provide us all the water we need to operate the mill. So that that alone is a fairly detailed project, because we're bringing water up a considerable elevation from the river and distance. So that will take a couple of months to get in place. Just the general construction you would need to get the mill up and running, and we think we can accomplish that within the next 6 to 10 months to have 1 ball mill up and running. We also have to prepare the tailings disposal facility. We're going to do a dry stack tailing, so that's one of the other major components of the construction project. And then we should be able to start producing out of 1 ball mill towards the end of this year, and then as quickly as possible bring the 2nd ball mill online, and early next year be ramping the mill up at capacity to hopefully declare commercial production mid next year. And for listeners, the commercial production is something that you declare once you have your mine operating to about 70-80% of management's expectations over a period of time. So we think that would be mid next year for commercial production, but we would be producing this as soon as we get that first ball mill up and running. We'll start production at a reduced capacity.
Okay, now part of this package, you're doing, there's a stream, there's a bank loan, there's an equity placement. But part of what I think is going to be riding along with this is, there's debts in the company right now that basically came from purchasing Campo Morado and essentially the construction that's being done to date on Tahuehueto. You're obviously in conversation with Nearstar and Trafigura, and Trafigura is essentially your main creditor, the main creditor. I know they would have had to be okay with this finance package, or it wouldn't have been announced in the first place. What's their feeling, or do you think you can do anything in terms of sort of renegotiating that debt and just kind of giving yourself some breathing room?
Yeah, I'll give you some background. So, the debt we have with Trafigura and Nearstar, and everybody should understand that Nearstar is now basically 99 or 100% owned by Trafigura. So we're essentially dealing with Trafigura on both the Nearstar debt at Campo Morado, as well as the Trafigura debt on both of our projects. So Trafi provided us a $5 million loan to restart operations at Campo Morado, and we paid a certain amount of that back, but we still owe some. And then at Tahuehueto, they gave us a facility for up to $15 million, and we drew $12.5 million to advance the construction to where it sits now. And we were also funding our own part of that from free cash flows from Campo Morado.
Right.
Where we got into trouble was when we had to shut down Campo Morado back in mid-2019. Our cash flow stopped. We couldn't fund our portion anymore, and the construction stopped. And so we got offside on all of our debt with Nearstar, Trafigura, and it was a pretty tough time. So we're in default. All the debt got moved into our financial statement as current rather than long term. Our financial statements looked darn awful, and the market read or anticipated that Telson was going to go under because of the debt we had defaulted on, and that our lenders would likely come in and try to foreclose. So, Trafi, I've got to say, have been they're not easy. I mean, they're very hard and astute negotiators, but they've been helpful to allow us to try to find a solution to get Tahuehueto into production. And that we have done. And so what we negotiated with them last year, we signed up waiver documents that Trafigura waived the defaults and Nearstar waived the defaults. And that allowed us a period of time to seek out and try to find a funding solution that would get us into production at Tahuehueto. There wasn't enough confidence in Campo Morado to pay back all the debt from cash flows from that mine at the current prices we had back when we were negotiating. So, as I say, Trafi was very helpful in allowing us to seek out that solution, and we have now found the solution. And part of that solution, in fact, all of the solution we brought to them has to be approved by Trafigura. In other words, for us to complete this deal, Trafi has been there every step along the way, looking at the terms, making sure that it all made sense to them, so it would allow us to get ourselves in production, be able to pay them back. They wanted to see the path that showed to get into production, and then we could service our debt with them over a period of time.
Right.
So they are very knowledgeable in every step of this transaction, and in fact, everything we've done over the past year and a half. And they have supported us. But again, I stress that they hold a lot of power, and they're very astute negotiators. And they've been cooperative and allowed us to get there. So what happens now is, as soon as we're getting the private placement will be completed within the next 2 weeks. Most of the money's already in. This is simply a matter of getting the preliminary approval with the exchange, which we expect early next week, and then closing the private placement. So within 2 weeks, maximum 3 weeks, it'll be fully closed. But in the meantime, we're getting started with the planning and starting to assemble our contractors and crews to start construction at Tahuehueto again. Moving back to Trafigura, what will happen with their debt, both Nearstar and Trafigura, is that they have agreed to restructure the debt. So all of the past interest, all of the default interest, and the principal on the loans are going to be restructured into a new loan and that will extend the period of time to repay, gives us a little bit more grace period. So we'll be able to move all of that debt back into long-term. And as long as we get this project built and start cash flowing and start to pay Trafi back, everything will be fine. One of the other major issues or events that we accomplished with Trafigura in order for them to restructure and allow us to refund was they required us to put all of our assets up into a trust, which we did. And it was an 8-month process in Mexico to establish this trust, move everything into it. So Trafi is fully secured, and there's mechanisms in that trust to allow new lenders such as Ascendo Banco, who's our primary lender in this new financing structure, as well as the Empress royalty stream, to be fully secured on their money. So they will enter into the trust be secured behind Trafigura within that trust. So everybody's very comfortable on their ability to protect their investment and allow this thing to move forward.
Now, I know in the case of both projects, I mean, Campo, you got a fair amount of money. You actually have a fair amount of mine life at both of them, really. The mine lives are good in both cases, but you got a lot of room by the looks of it. There's quite a lot of exploration room here. I mean, I think it's kind of a toss-up. I mean, a lot of traders, a lot of mining investors, I mean, they love to see drill results and stuff, and so do I. I mean, it's no secret I'm a sucker for a drill play. But I mean, in this case, I just see so much leverage and so much potential movement in your bottom line that I think that's going to be the dominant factor. And obviously you're going to worry about getting the mine built and up to snuff. But looking a little bit farther out, I mean, what do you think your plans would be, sort of in a big picture level, to try to grow and extend these resources?
Well, it's just a function of starting drills up. I mean, as soon as we are healthy enough and we have enough money to direct at exploration, then on both projects, we just start to drill. And there's no question in my mind that we'll immediately start bringing in new resources and reserves. We already have the targets identified on both projects. Campo Morado, Nearstar had spent a lot of money on exploration on a regional basis outside of their existing mine area. They developed at least 15 targets, and some of them coincident for geophysics, electromagnetics, gravity, and geochemistry. And some of these are coincident. These are targets that just are sitting there waiting to be drilled. All we need to do is relocate them and start putting holes into them. And any one of those could bring up new massive sulfide bodies to come into the mine plan. And then if you go right within the underground workings and the existing ore bodies, we have a number of borehole geophysical targets, electromagnetic geophysical targets that have been identified, and they're ready to drill. And in fact, Nearstar drilled a couple of underground holes into those and hit good massive sulfide intersections. So those need to be drilled out, and the other ones they haven't drilled need to be tested. And I don't think there's any question that we will come up with new resources and bring those into reserves and future mine feed. You know, if anyone understands these types of deposits, they're big pods of mineralization, and they're often stacked up on top of each other and out over a long distance along the prospective rock horizons. So they tend to make long-term mines, and they tend to continue to find ore bodies as you develop and explore. So we're pretty confident that we can do that. And in fact, if we get ourselves healthy enough and can really start drilling, and we bring up enough reserves that can justify expansions, we could see this mine moving up to 5,000 tons a day. And that's not something that's going to happen overnight. It would take, 3, 4, 5 years or more to get there, but it has the potential to do it. And then if you switch over to Tahuehueto, this is a district scale project. I mean, we control about 83% of a 95 square kilometer district. And we've only just explored along one structure. And we know there's multiple structures there. So you see them on surface. We see them in the old historic records. And we have to drill test them. And even on the structure that we have drilled, we still haven't found the bottoms of these ore bodies. So they're open to depth and along strike. We've only drilled along the structure intermittently over about 3 kilometers. But I believe there's over 7 kilometer potential strike length along this structural corridor that hosts these known structures. And then if you go off to the east, to the west, it's all covered by this younger rock. I'm not sure if people can see this picture. Can you see that, Eric? And I'll just outline all of this younger rock here. This is an ignimbrite rock, and it covers all of this. Yeah. It covers all of this prospective rock. This is the andesitic type of rocks. This is a later rock that was extruded and covered over all the mineralization. Well, these types of ignimbrite rocks go to the west throughout the entire area of our project. And I believe that the type of structures we're drilling now will continue to be underneath this type of rock. It's something, again, you're not going to really be able to drill from surface or discover them from surface. You're going to need to get underground and start to explore and develop them along these horizons underground. So huge exploration potential at Tahuehueto. And without any question, I'm confident to say that we can expand the current resources and reserves really quickly just by connecting up the dots of areas where we haven't drilled along the one structure and add immediate resources reserves to the mine plan. Right now, we have about a 10-year mine life with our reserves. We have additional 9 or 10-year mine life with the measured and indicated resources, which just require a little bit of drilling to bring them up into reserve. And then I think there's double, triple that just along these major structures that we're working on, and with future exploration, we'll bring it in. And that could all justify bringing Tahuehueto up from 1,000 tons per day to 2,000 or to 3,000 tons per day over the next 2 to 5 years as well. So very large expansion possibilities on both projects.
I think that probably covers everything for today. I think all of you watching this, if you like these kind of stocks, you definitely want to be able to take a hard look and a hard think on this. The symbols are in the upper left side of the screen there. TSN on the venture, SOHFF, OTC in the US, and TSGN on
Frankfurt.
that's on Frankfurt. Yeah, on Frankfurt. And just, it's definitely worth your time to go through the deck. Think about the improvements that Ralph and I talked about earlier in this interview in terms of added throughput, definitely the potential improvements of both base metal and precious metal, particularly recoveries at Campo Morato. Really, if you sit down and walk through those on the background envelope, I think you'll be surprised how big the numbers are. They're pretty big. And then on top of that, there's essentially a gold mine, their second mine going into production towards the end of the year. Gold projects tend to get bigger multiples. You just take all of those things combined. I think there's room here for a really, really impressive turnaround. And then as Ralph just told you, and there's a few slides on this in the corporate deck too. There's tons and tons of room to make both of these things bigger resources. I think it's a great story, and the key to making money on turnaround stories is timing. And I think the timing is basically right now. They just announced this finance package. Now is the time you really want to be looking hard at this. Now's the time you want to get on it. I took a chunk in the placement for that reason. And I came into it as a skeptic because I won't lie to you, the current balance sheet looks pretty ugly. The first time I looked at it, it was just like, oh man. But once you walk through it and realize what they can do to restructure and what they can do to improve cash flows in the bottom line, it's a really great turnaround story. You've done a great job here, Ralph. I know this one's been your baby for a long time, and things were pretty ugly there for 3 or 4 years, but it looks like you have pulled the proverbial rabbit out of the hat.
Well, Eric, it's never one person too. I want to stress that. I mean, obviously it's been a lot of hard work and a lot of stubbornness on my part, but we've had a good group of people behind us, helping us, and we've had established really good relationships with our lenders to allow this to happen. So all in all, it's been a lot of work, but it will be worth it when it all comes to fruition, and that's starting now. I guess one of the other points I would make is that we have not marketed for the last 2 years because we just haven't been healthy enough to do that.
Right.
So we're just going to be starting quite a aggressive marketing campaign over this coming year.
Okay.
And that should help the story a lot.
Yeah, and you should have good news flowing in between,
Yeah,
new and improved financials, but also construction on the second mine, all this new network, and then probably some drilling exploration coming behind it. I mean, there should be.
And the testing, the testing it from the pilot plant in Campo Morato, will be ongoing results from that. So we will have a really good news flow. And if we start turning drills, if we get healthy enough to turn some drills, there'll certainly be lots of news flow from that. But that's probably a little bit further down the road.
Right. Okay, I think that's it for today, folks. Telson Mining Corporation, TSN on the venture. Great story. Take a hard look at it. See you all later.